Good afternoon and welcome to Video Stream Asia, organized by DVO Media. We have our second panel for the day, which is on content strategy. I have a varied variety of panelists here representing different OTTs and different media companies. So, just before I hand it over to the participants for introduction, so our panel discussion today is going to be on content budgets and how the content strategy is shaping up for various OTTs. If you look at content, it forms a very large part of the overall cost base for any OTT. We've seen large scale web series being produced by global OTT giants, by Indian broadcaster companies. Some of them were having huge star casts. Some of them were having huge budgets in terms of sets and locations. During the lockdown, because of cinemas being shut, we also saw this phenomena wherein the content strategy kind of got altered. We saw films going directly on OTT, and OTTs were paying a hefty premium to the producers for getting their films, directly on OTT. So today we're going to discuss, in terms of content, how important are content budgets. What is the kind of efficiency and the effectiveness? What are the kind of strategies an OTT gets into before deciding upon a particular content, and how can one get the maximum ROI from that investment? So I'll just quickly introduce. I'll just ask all the participants to quickly introduce themselves, and then we can move ahead with the topics of discussion. So Harish, if I can start off with you, please.
First of all, very good day to everyone. Thank you, Deepak and Karan, for having me today. My name is Harish Goel. I'm joining from Singapore today. Last 15 years, I have been working in telecom and media. Last 7 years has been in ZSL Group. Currently, I'm CEO Health and Wellness, managing the US-based health and wellness business of the group. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Harish. Ahad.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. My name is Ahad. I'm the founder and CEO of Bongo, which is Bangladesh's largest OTT platform. And we're based in Bangladesh. I'm currently dialing in from Canada, but regularly based in Bangladesh. Excited to hear what everyone else has to say as well.
Thanks. Ashwin?
Good afternoon. My name is Ashwin. I am representing MediaStar Indonesia. It's a new OTT platform which we did a soft launch in Indonesia in November, and we should be looking at launching in Malaysia, Brunei, Singapore, and Indonesia around in between March to April. That's the timelines which we're looking at. I take care of the entire content and strategy for the platform. And to initially start off with, Indonesia has been doing our first market for the launch. And looking forward to this discussion with all the panelists on board. Thank you, Deepak, for organizing this and inviting me on the panel.
Right. Anjali?
So I'm saying that I represent Ulu India, and I work as a country head with the group. And with experience, I've got experience in HR, operations, and I carry 25 years of experience with me. I'm looking after different sectors for Ulu, which is like PR, social, content, and a lot of other things like podcast merchandising, wherein I play an integral part. I'm so excited to be part of this, and I look forward for the discussion. Thank you for inviting me and the group.
Right, thanks. So I'm Karan Taurani, your moderator for today. I am Vice President with Elara Capital, and I cover the media entertainment sector in terms of research. So let's just quickly, begin this panel, by bringing Anjali into the conversation. Of course, we've seen OTT as a phenomena which is, very attractive for the youth and the male-based audience. Okay. Now, the kind of content play Ulu app has got, it's very male-centric, and it's got a lot of eyeballs in general, in a country like India and globally as well. So, Anjali, if you could just share some insights here in terms of, since you already have a very substantial amount of customer base in terms of a target audience, something similar to what the sports has got, how easy it is for you to expand your offerings in India and globally, and specifically to globally, if you can highlight some of the strategies in terms of what are the kind of content consumption trends you are seeing there for your OTT?
Yeah. So I'll take it separately. I'll start with why and how do we have, the largest part of digital content viewership is for male. So we were doing a survey where we found that, 57% of internet users were adults. And, this 57%, we had 30 to 49 years of, the bracket of age was 30 to 49 years. And if we talk about young adults, it was about 76%, which was like 18 to 29, with an age group of 18 to 29. We also had something where we found that 59% were these young adults were ones who watched at home, and there are others who were reported work viewing. So I think why are males the largest part is that, I think there is a kind of social motivation, desire to share the viewing experience with someone else. And, men are very, I'm sorry to say that, but men are very keen on doing so. The way, men experience online videos, they want to share it with their people. They want to express their more interest in sharing what they find. And they are the most contagious carriers, I will say. Pardon my words, but that's what happens. So, so I agree with that. Factors in consideration that men and young adults, they are the main audience for our online video. Your second question was, how do you plan, to scale up offerings in India and abroad? What are our expansion plans outside India?
And what are the kind of consumption patterns you've seen so far for your kind of content in terms of demand globally?
Yeah. So I think in India, content is increasingly being consumed on handheld devices, and we all agree with it. Since generation doesn't have patience to wait for shows, so how we plan is by compelling content, and there are two ways of doing it. We compel by compelling content and providing seamless kind of user experience to our viewers. We are also planning exclusive series with the top talent and filmmakers. We are bringing in big budgets. Now, the current situation, entry cost for I think the new players will be quite high, in terms of content. We get an advantage because we as an existing player have a great pipeline and library to do so. Also in India, what will surprise all of us is that rural India is opening a new distribution channel. And, we found that tier 2 and tier 3 cities, we have, OTT viewing has increased after pandemic. So OTT subscriptions have become the, I'll say, if it is right to say that, the latest weapon in today's telecom war. Then we also found that the cheapest mobile data, OTT seems to be the normal in field of entertainment. So when you say, how do you plan to scale up offering? I'll just quickly summarize and say that we would want to compel on content, and we are providing, we wish to provide a seamless user experience, if I summarize it up. Your last question was, how do you plan to, have expansion outside India now? So for that, we have formulated aggressive expansion strategies right now to capture market outside India. I'll just summarize by saying that we are in terms with a lot of entities and content providers with other international platforms to be able to reach potential Indian viewers overseas. We are targeting markets like Middle East, US, UK. So we have inked a revenue sharing telco partners abroad, which will be like mix of acquired and original content. So I think, it will be a wise move as an individual, as a group for us, because the same can cushion some revenue deficit on Indian side and ensure that, we are there in the market. So when I say expansion plans outside, we have our strategies intact.
Right. Very interesting indeed. Harish, let me bring you on the conversation here. Zee has primarily been a broadcaster. You probably would have, dubbed many of your existing shows, which have done phenomenally well in India, and, done some kind of cross-selling there. Of course, dubbing is something which has got a very high amount of ROI. Now, the current context wherein people really want to watch digital content, people really want to watch larger than life kind of web series, kind of shows. What is your content strategy? Clearly. So, are you trying to also get onto the new content, or probably get onto a larger star cast in terms of making these expensive web series? Or do you believe dubbing is still as an opportunity has not, you've not like kind of completely squeezed the juice out of the dubbing opportunity as yet? And if you can also highlight some kind of patterns and trends of consumption behavior in Africa and Asia markets in general, like basically the propensity to pay, the kind of content they watch, the time spent, if you can share those trends as well.
Thank you, Karan. It's quite elaborate and my favorite question. First of all, I'll say in content, media, and telecom business, never fall in love with your views. Having said that, I will express my views now, which are my personal views and learnings of last 7 years, having worked in Africa and Asia Pacific, 70 odd countries. My answer about dubbing of content, global content, depends on whether I am answering it with a wide stroke brush or with a fine brush. Because the success and the answer varies depending on, I've seen a varied level of success of the dubbed content or customized and adaptation of the content depending on, first of all, language. I've seen dubbing in English, in French, Swahili for East Africa market, Amharic language for Ethiopia, Bahasa in Indonesia, and Thai language for Thailand markets. Second is actually, what kind of target viewers are we chasing? Are we chasing the mainstream viewers? For example, for Africa market, if we are chasing the Black African woman 19 to 45, high LSM, or we are chasing the Indonesian mainstream viewers, or we are actually chasing the South Asian viewers who are probably fifth generation of Indian origin but settled outside India, may have lost touch with the original Hindi language. Or the target viewers are the first generation expat Indians who understand Hindi very well, who track the Indian market very well. So the success will vary depending on who are we targeting. Success also varies depending on country to country and the level of development of the country, whether it is a developing market or it's a developed market, the level of telecom developments in the country. And then the second part of this dubbing business is, it's not only dubbing in the right accent, which is important for the content to appeal to the viewers, but also the duration of the show depending on the market, because certain markets really like a long format, 1 hour episodes. Other markets appreciate 30-minute episodes. Some markets are actually now only having patience of watching and prefer to watch the webisodes of 15 minutes. And then there are fast track markets who actually love to watch mobisodes, which are 5 minutes. So these are some of the finer things. And then there is also, depending on the pace of the storyline, whether how fast is the storyline moving. Like in India, we prefer to have a melodrama wherein, the original content and story, even if you have missed few episodes, it doesn't matter. On the other hand, there are markets who actually prefer to have the fast track, American versions of the content. And then the selection of the right drama series, which is backed by a very good market research and the focus group studies. If the focus group studies have been done right, dubbing, adaptation, customization has been done right, and the right market has been selected with the correct accent, it does very well. And then I have also seen success of the integrated production of the dramas, which are reformatted or reproduced using the local star cast. For example, if I'm chasing a South Asian country, we reproduce a good story appealing to those viewers, which has already been proven in another market, using the local actors in, let's say, in East Africa or in South Africa or in Indonesia. Second part of the question that you have asked, Karan, is readiness to pay in Africa versus Asia market. It again, as I said, touched earlier, it depends on the level of development of the telecom in the country. What is the cost of internet? What is the speed of the internet? So if I am actually, I have to answer this question wearing a African hat, and I'll say for South Africa, yes, speed of internet is good, cost of internet is high. And vis-a-vis a South Asia Pacific country, I'll say, look, the level of infrastructure speed and cost of internet is low. Yeah, so some markets, it depends as to, what's the level of telecom development. And second, what kind of target LSM are we actually chasing? Overall, just to sum up, I would say dubbing, adaptation, customization of is, if it is backed by a good focus group and research, it actually is a really success recipe. Thank you.
Right, right. Very detailed insight indeed. Ahad, you're looking after Bongo, one of the largest OTT offering in Bangladesh. What exactly are your plans to scale up? And, if you can, I mean, earlier also we had in the previous panel, we had got a lot of insights in terms of how the content consumption is increasing in Bangladesh, given the increasing broadband penetration, internet penetration. But of course, even there as well, people are not willing or ready to pay for content. The problem is very similar to what it is in India. So are you looking at, kind of diversifying from the same, kind of wanting to expand into other countries which are more friendly in terms of paying for digital content? If you can just share some insights on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were the first OTT platform in the country, and luckily we're the largest today. And we actually work with a lot of the other providers in the ecosystem. So we have a massive user base, and although we've seen that one of the major issues in the Bangladesh market is, of course, the willingness to pay for content, we have seen that there is a big willingness for advertisers to pay for reach and for eyeballs. So as long as we're able to get the views and get the users and get the reach, we are still able to monetize. Now, that being said, when we started this platform, there was no digital media ecosystem. There was no streaming platforms. There was not even the concept of digital rights in Bangladesh at that point. And so what we really did was develop a platform to meet the needs of the market and adapt it to the needs of the market over time. And what we've really felt and what we've seen is that one of the biggest groups of people who are actually in need of a solution are the content creators themselves. And what we've seen is that through the platform that we've built, and then the partnerships and the distribution partners that we've built over time, we've seen that we've been able to solve a really big problem, which is helping the content creators and content publishers really increase their distribution, increase their reach, and achieve monetization. And that is something that is a requirement not only in Bangladesh, but in our neighboring countries as well. So to answer your question about expansion, we have already started expanding to our neighboring countries, because we've seen that the platform that we built actually does meet the needs of these the content creators and content publishers as well. And when I'm saying publishers, I mean, for example, telcos, TV stations, educational institutions. One of the services that we offer is also offering our platform as a service to these publishers. So we've already launched in Nepal, in India, and in West Bengal, in Pakistan. We've also expanded into Sri Lanka. Recently, Egypt. We're working on some partnerships in Lebanon and Nigeria as well to basically replicate the same model. And we've been able to prove that the model works in Bangladesh. And we're very confident that when we do expand, we will be able to achieve the same results in other countries. And we've already seen that it has started to pick up. At the end of the day, users, regardless of where they are always going to look for high quality content, whether it's live cricket or whether it's the latest blockbuster movies. And what we've been able to successfully do since we started was to secure the flow of high quality content. And by building up the relationships within the industry, and then over the last few years, by leveraging our user base and our relationships with the artists, with the producers, and with the directors, we've also been able to secure exclusive flow to the best content, to the best movies as they're coming out. So we are able to ensure that we have the best quality content and entertainment consistently for our users.
Right, indeed. We've also had a previous panel wherein a lot of the homegrown OTTs have seen a lot of scope for growth in overseas markets, and in fact, even the growth numbers are going to be higher as compared to the domestic revenue, for the international subscription revenue. So it's a very promising story for many of the local OTTs to actually scale up, given the large global audience which is there. Ashwin, yeah, please finish.
Sorry, just one thing I want to add to that is, as you rightly mentioned, the other advantage that we have being a South Asian player is, of course, the massive diaspora population. And in terms of monetization, we've seen that the ARPUs that we can earn by offering the same content on the same platform to Bangladeshis or South Asians living in other countries, like, for example, in Malaysia, in the Middle East, in Europe and North America, the earning potential and the monetization opportunities are significantly higher there. So that is definitely something that we're also focusing on in making our service available to that community as well.
Right. Thanks for those insights. Ashwin, I would like to actually bring you back and bring you also in the conversation here. In terms of distribution, the question here is, so typically we've seen India, it's a very value-centric audience. Even here, if you see in terms of the subscription base of the number of subscribers we have, largely they come through telco-based bundle packs, right? And they either come through aggregators or they largely come through telco-based bundle packs. So it's kind of, that people don't want to specifically pay for one single app. Unless it's free, they would probably go for it. Otherwise, they will not pay for one single app. They're a value-driven audience, right? Now, what are the kind of trends and patterns globally? Are globally also the consumers value-driven? They don't want to pay separately for apps. I mean, what typically, if you can give some numbers, throw some numbers here in terms of what are the number of apps a global subscriber would pay for versus India? How different is that market?
Right. Like if you have to compare the Indonesia market, it's almost similar to India when it comes to demographics or content consumption. Both believe in the concept of Dil Mange More. The way I believe is that the content aggregators and telco companies play a crucial part in this whole distribution ecosystem. That's primarily because, I'm speaking from my experience in Indonesia. Indonesia has primarily been always a free-to-air market. So it has been where people are more used to watching free-to-air channels. So there are almost more than 15 free-to-air channels. The distribution is still analog that way. So the way I look at this, telcos has made it possible for content aggregators or for OTT platforms to reach out to maximum number of audience. Like a free-to-air channel might have a reach of about, say, more than 95% in Indonesia. The telcos, the top 3 telcos would give you maybe a reach of more than 80%. That's where we look at a synergy between an aggregator and a telco company. Also, what comes to the telcos, primarily when they launched in, were very dependent on revenue through talk time, but that has been diminishing year on year as we see the trends. And now the only thing which is bringing them revenue is data, and the data consumption can happen is when the consumer is actually watching content. Like if I speak from the point of view of Indonesia as a market, the average consumption of a consumer watching content on a mobile is around, on a daily basis, about 3.5 hours of content. So that's the amount of data he's been consuming while watching content, and that's what telcos want. So that's how the way I look at it is, players like Netflix and all might have an initial run in the game because they're bringing up with great originals, great star cast, and the market. But overall, in the long run, I think so. It's the amalgamation of telco and content aggregators which will win the game.
So it's very similar as an approach for a customer. They are also value driven, just like it is in India. It's not like
very similar to India. Like I said, the demographics, the way they consume the content, the culture, the population, mere sheer size of population as like India, it actually, then you can actually replicate the way the content consumption or habits of the consumer are in Indonesia.
So are they also not sticky in nature? Because Indian consumers typically want, if there's a web series, if there's an IPL, I'm going to subscribe to Hotstar. Once IPL ends, I'm going to move out of it. So are they similar in terms of behavior, or you think that they don't care? They will just probably go on for a year and even if they were to consume the OTT just for 2 months at a very heavy, in terms of heavy time spent consumption, they would not disconnect from it. So what's the stickiness exactly in global markets?
So Indonesia market, the stickiness factors is actually the content which brings them on. Like for example, the number one OTT player in Indonesia, which I would think is VU. They primarily bring in the Korean content, and that is what Indonesia as a consumer has been liking. So they going in for the content rather than a platform. So right now, VU is offering you the latest and the best of the Korean content which is being offered, but there's no other player which is maybe matching up or competing with VU. That's the reason they would go on to. But if you look at like how it's cricket in India, the similar trend is with football in Indonesia. So whenever there's a football season which is happening, and people will will go on to that VOD platform or that free to air channel to watch football. So like I said, the trend is very similar, but it is not. I would say it is very content driven. For example, they're looking at say local Indonesian content, they would go to a certain OTT player called Video. If they're looking at and the way we are positioning Media Star in Indonesia is they're going to be the bringing in the latest Hollywood blockbusters in Indonesia. So the way every OTT player has its own positioning, which is very strong in Indonesia.
Right. Anjali, bringing you back in the conversation here in terms of content budgets and content strategy. Typically, your is a type of OTT which does not require large star cast or large budgets in terms of making the content. So, do you also believe that the kind of ROI in terms of your content strategy is much more better as compared to competitors? And secondly, of course, on the competitive intensity in this space which is there, which are the other leading players making the kind of content which your app makes?
Okay, so yes, our app doesn't have a big star cast. We don't have big budgets, rightly said. But I would be glad to share that we have been a revolutionary example for the fact that the small budgets or a no star cast can also make their impact in market, and not in market only, but minds of cine lovers. What happens is, sometimes huge budgets, big names, they also bomb. What is important, I think, for us is conceptualization. And having said that, big names from our industry, they have started approaching. They would want to be associated with a few small budget films as well, if they are shooted with a different approach. Because I remember reading an article where Amir Khan or Shah Rukh Khan, biggies of industry, have also said that we would want to be associated if the project is nice. And I'll tell you, a lot of population also wants to see these small films, small budgeted films, where, the emphasis on establishing directors' creativity and, abilities of bringing it out. So, yes, we are proud of the fact that, the small budgets and no big star cast, we're still making a lot of money and name in the industry. So, yes, this was your first question. Then the second is that, how is our ROI better than others?
And the competitive intensity, of course, in the type of adult content which you have, basically. Who are the other key players in that space? Yeah.
So, we are slowly becoming a favorite destination for content watchers here in India, for narrative that, aren't available elsewhere. And COVID has been a tipping point for, I think, all OTT adoptions, and has worked in a very great way. So penetration has been immense. Credibility for the medium has increased. The user base has jumped tenfolds across, including us, for everybody. And I'll talk about myself. For us, yes, it has increased. So maximizing better ROI to reach the right audience segment was our key forte for this new digital planning. So yes, we have achieved that. We are better and progressing than a lot of other OTTs and ROIs who are in the market, who produce same kind of, I will not say same kind of product, but yes, similar kind of product is like, if you may have heard about Alt or, Hoi Choi. How Choi was a bad name to refer, but Alt is something which we actually refer.
Very similar to. Right.
Yes, very similar
And
for
are these kind of web series or the kind of content what Palaji or what Ulu makes? Firstly, of course, they're binge watching nature. They have a very loyal audience. That's fine about it. But do you believe that there is a potential of of also some kind of payment mechanism in a big way from from your customer base?
See, the budget is the creative cost is too low, I think,
Right.
in this. And but I
No, but
also
that
believe
can that
that
be an added trigger because of course you have the support of AWOT that's doing phenomenally well for you. But can also the subscription revenue or the pay-based revenue, be as an added trigger, for your OTT or help you generate better ROI.
yes, they do.
Right. Until then, I'll just continue my conversation with Harish actually. So Harish, I have a very interesting question here until Anjali joins us. In terms of this direct OTT release, which is there, of course, India, it's now kind of fading away because cinemas have opened up. Almost 90% of screens in the country of multiplexes are open in India today. Globally, the numbers are very low. It's almost 40% of screens open. Asia generally, if you look at China and other emerging nations in Asia, the number of screens open and again 80, 85, 90% plus. What is your sense on this, in terms of direct OTT releases in Asia? Of course, we've heard stories, and I am personally of the view that, it's not a sustainable trend. It was a COVID trend. But of course, US, UK, we've seen trends like, simultaneous release happening. That's because the number of screens opening there are very low. India, of course, we've seen a pipeline of Yash Raj getting announced yesterday, and many films are going to start coming in. But what about the other Asian markets? You believe that still, there are films or producers who are wanting to go the direct OTT route, given the number of cinemas open is very high in other Asian markets?
Thank you, Karan, for bringing in a very important aspect. You have kind of answered it partially. My answer is, it's a big change for all stakeholders, for viewers, for cinema owners, for producers. Any change takes a bit of time to accept. It's a bit early to talk about the real success stories in the markets we are talking about, Asia and the developing markets. I see it as a successful model in medium and long run. It's just that we have tasted it now in last few months, and whenever this aspect comes back, I think we'll be open to this change, and we'll be open to this aspect. Thank you.
Right, that's interesting indeed. But if you can just highlight some kind of content budget breakup generally, not for Z specifically, but for the industry. We've seen case in point wherein there are many of these OTTs which have certain amount of budgets only for film content, and they won't go beyond that. Of course, because of COVID, web series shoots were stalled, and they actually went up spending extra on the movie content budget. But do you also believe the same that beyond a point, OTTs will not spend on movie content, and the premiums what they've paid in the recent past for direct OTT release, that will basically narrow down in the near to medium term?
My view is it's a very competitive world. We see a lot of new platforms launching almost every other month, and at the same time, a lot of existing platforms also shutting their shops. And in this new business of OTT, I would say any amount of budget is actually, is low. You need more. You need large spends. We take example of the leader in this business or the top 3 leaders, or we take example of any of the platforms or the players. So I think this budgeting question, or the, what is a good amount of spend, it's quite a depending on the amount of hunger, or your how deep pockets one is actually sitting with. Important from a business aspect or from a business case perspective is that what is that inflection point, or what is the point at which you see any spend as a good spend for your platform, and that too not from the short run perspective, but from the medium and long term perspective. Thank you.
Right. Very interesting. Ahad, I'll just bring you back in the conversation here again in terms of the distribution models. So in Bangladesh, typically, obviously in India, emerging nations, we've got various models. We've got telcos, OEMs, smart TVs. So in Bangladesh, typically, which kind of distribution on digital forms a larger pie? That's one. And secondly, how are the payment mechanisms, the minimum guarantees? How are the terms between the OTT and the telecom service providers? Is there always some kind of a rift between them, basis the kind of shows they make, or basis the kind of shows which become successful or a failure, or it is more steady, in terms of the payments which are given by these partners, to the OTTs? What's the kind of distribution mechanism there?
Okay, so to answer the first part regarding the distribution platforms, the most commonly used platforms for video and non-video, of course, are YouTube and Facebook. Facebook, including non-video, and then there's YouTube, but that's for free content. In terms of local content, in addition to Bongo, there are basically the telco platforms, which are Grameenphone, Robi, Banglalink, and Airtel, out of which we actually are partners, or we power majority of them, all but one, in fact. So, we're closely associated and partner with majority of the streaming that actually occurs in Bangladesh in the local context. With regards to the payments, there's a couple of modalities because they have live TV streaming and then VOD as well. So live TV is pretty straightforward. Typically, it's just a fixed license fee. And because these are larger companies, especially with a lot of the international broadcasters coming on board as well, there's not really any issues with payments. They're pretty standardized payment terms, pretty standardized rates. So that's pretty simple. With regards to VOD, to be honest, a lot of the content distribution and licensing happens through us because we are, the largest player in terms of digital rights, and we have the largest content library. So most of the time we end up with the rights, and then we distribute it to a lot of the content partners or the platforms that we have. It's a combination of one-time flat fees or a minimum guarantee, which is normally a fixed license fee for a fixed term. But generally, it's quite consistent because the paymasters are either ourselves or the telcos, and because the content industry is now growing and it's becoming quite competitive in terms of the demand for the content online and then for which platform gets it. It's quite competitive. The payment terms are good, and the flow is quite good as well. With regards to original productions, we do a lot of originals, and then the telcos also do commission a lot of originals as well. Again, the pricing is pretty standardized within the industry. Of course, digital rights, the content that's being produced on these digital platforms, I would say the advantage is for the industry and for the end consumer is that because of the demand, the quality has definitely gone up. And when we see that the originals are being produced for digital platforms, like for example, even if we're producing an original series, I find that the budgets are higher and therefore the quality is better than what we had typically seen in the industry before, like for example, what used to go on TV. And a large part of that reason is that the scope is larger and wider, right? When you're producing, let's say for example, Bongo is producing an original, we can release it on Bongo and make money through subscriptions and advertising. We can resell that content later on. We can redistribute it to airlines. We can sell it to TV stations later on, after our first run. Whereas traditionally, when content was being produced for TV only, the production budget was directly proportionate to the ad revenue that they were going to get from there. So I feel like with the additional scope and opportunity for monetization also comes additional budget, and through that comes better quality, better innovation, more creativity. So I really think that the boom of all of these OTT platforms and the digital consumption in general in our industry has definitely had a positive impact on the quality of content and content production and the variety of it as well.
Right. Thanks. Very detailed insight. Ashwin, firstly, do you think content budgets are sustainable? Of course, they're increasing every year with time, but are these budgets sustainable in terms of the growth factor? Do you believe that there's still a potential for these budgets to become maybe 2x or 2.5x from current high levels in the next 5 years? That's one. And the second part, of course, is the preference of the audience. I mean, of course, India is a country wherein people usually pay only for sports or very some differentiated kind of content, which is by a Netflix or an Amazon, some kind of web series which is very large scale in nature. So what is generally, what are the general trends abroad? Are they also like a freemium audience kind of a thing, or are they very SWOT friendly and they really want to pay for, they're okay paying for content which is ad free as an experience?
Okay. So, firstly, if you ask me, I think so. The content budget is actually depending upon how the content player or the OTT platform wants to position itself. So you have a universal player like a Netflix who doesn't mind having huge content budgets because it gets amortized over different countries and the way they make the money off. But then if you keep on increasing the content budgets and the ROI, if you see most of the OTT platforms start on a huge bang. They come up with great content budgets, but then they realize that in a year or two the ROI is not making sense, and they either shut down or they sell off or something. So the way I look at it is, and this has been my learning even in Indonesia, where I saw a huge player like Hook also shutting down all its operations in Asia. I realized that in the long run, it's the award which might work in the, especially in a cost centric market like Southeast Asia. So they might look at an SWOT model when it comes to like premium spots or when it comes to premium content. Like for example, if it's a Hollywood release and the way Warner has said that okay, the next 12 or 21 releases are going to be simultaneously on the platform as well as in theaters. That kind of a model might work when people want to pay in for a premium content. But if they're going to be consuming a lot of content, which is like YouTube content, or they're going to be consuming about 3 or 4 hours of content, they would look at an AVOD model. As a research or as a trend, what we're saying, the consumers specifically in Southeast Asia don't mind paying for don't mind watching ads instead of paying for the subscription as such. So they would look at an AVOD model. So the way I think most of the apps which have been positioning themselves are in a hybrid kind of platform. So they're looking at offering both one. For example, MediaStar, the way we position ourselves is going to be a hybrid model where we're saying that when it comes to premium Hollywood studio content, we're going to be on SVOD. But when it comes to regular content or free-to-air channels, or we're getting in more content from, say, Africa, from Turkey and all, we're looking at an AVOD model. So the way I would look at it is maybe about, say, 80% of our content is going to be on AVOD, 20% is going to be super premium.
Right, right. So I mean, hybrid is basically the way ahead, for the industry, which is very similar to what is happening in India as well.
Right.
Moving on to the last part, I see a last question for all of you all to answer. I'll start off with Anjali first. Anjali, are you there?
Yes. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just.
So no, that's okay. So, I wanted to ask this question to all the panelists. I'll just start off with you first. Firstly, from an India perspective, is there a need for any kind of censorship, or is self-regulation good enough, okay, for the content? And are there any kind of loopholes, or are there any kind of discrepancies within the self-regulation system? Because, we've seen various controversies coming, time and again, as far as India OTT digital goes, basically. So if you can just share any kind of thoughts on that in terms of how we can go ahead towards self-regulation in a much more standardized way and in a much more, so to say, a proper way, so that there is no kind of interference in terms of creativity. Yeah, please.
See, if you ask me as an individual and as a group, and you ask me, is there any need of censorship on digital? See, majorly OTT players have considered this self-regulation of content, which you're mentioning, on their respective platforms, by way of volunteering code for online content, especially in relation to when it comes, what we have experienced is in relation to language or maybe the violence or, the sex which we are showing, which is to obviously suit local and regional sensibilities in India and to avoid legal actions. But digital content industry appears to be divided also on its view, for a voluntary code. If you ask us, we do not want to self-impose any code or regulation on operations and need to have a creative freedom. It therefore appears that, certification of any other form of censorship norm or for the online content may see a backlash from stakeholders like us. But yes, we need to create a balance. When I say it has to be between the creative freedom and the general interest of all of us and the society.
Right. Harish, if you can also give your comments on this and also share a perspective in terms of what is happening in the other emerging nations and globally in terms of self-regulation. Of course, there's no censorship out there, but what is happening globally, and that could be replicated in India today?
I would say that self-discipline is always good. Having said that, last 5 years personally, I've been actually, trying and seeing as to, how much of self-discipline is the creative industry following. And we have all waited in the hope that, some kind of self-control and restraint will remain on what we show on screen to the young generation and the growing kids in our house, because most of the content is actually watched still sitting together, people of different age. So I would actually say, depending on hope only without a concrete action plan is not a good plan. So what I am actually alluding to is it's time regulator need to pitch in.
Right, got it. Ashwin, your comments on the same?
I think so. What I can say is that we can't say one size fits all. So we have to respect the rule of the land. So for example, when it comes to Indonesia, Netflix was almost blocked for about 4 years because they were not agreeing to the censorship rules set down by the Indonesian government. So, but the way I look at it is self-regulatory can be worked out in favor of an OTT platform also. For example, if they want to position themselves saying that, okay, we are a very family-friendly kind of content, and that's how we self-regulate our content, and they market it themselves. But I personally, in fact, would like to also congratulate and happy with the way Ulu is positioning itself. So when you actually log in, they actually give you an option of would you like to follow a censored content or uncensored content. So it's basically giving the freedom to the audience in terms of how do they want to consume the content. Because I personally feel if you want to regulate what kind of content an OTT platform is going to bring in, then it's going to be going down the same way how a TV station has been working today. So today you have Hollywood movies, you have also B-grade movies which are going on in the country, releasing theaters and on digital platforms. So I think so both will coexist, and at the end of the day, the consumer needs to choose what they want to watch.
Right. Ahad, if you can share what is happening in Bangladesh, with this aspect. Hello, Ahad, are you there?
Hi, sorry, it was just cutting out a bit. Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so I was just talking about this content regulation, censorship, self-regulation. We've seen instances wherein the self-regulation framework has got some kind of loopholes. Despite having the self-regulation norm, we've got made of controversies in India today because of the kind of digital content is being showcased. So what is exactly happening in Bangladesh? Of course, the censorship is not possible for digital. It's going to obstruct the growth in a very big way. But what are the kind of other norms and policies which are seeing, for actually making content which is having a standard self-regulatory approach?
It's still very early days, but there are policies being created, both in terms of the different types of platforms. For example, adapting content which is made for TV, then for IPTV platforms, and there's regulations coming into place for the import of content, for the rights to dub content. Importing content is now requiring approvals from relevant ministries. So even though it is quote unquote self-regulated and it's a digital platform, digital content still does fall under certain restrictions and copyright. I mean, if we were to go out and try and make very provocative adult type platform, like adult type content, like a lot of platforms are doing, we definitely would face backlash. So it's not that it's a free for all. A lot of platforms are enjoying this in other countries, but in Bangladesh, it's not really like that. So even though it's digital, there definitely still is a certain level of censorship. And whenever we're producing content, we basically, our philosophy is we don't think of, okay, how can we bypass censorship? We want to respect the values of the community and the users. So we always look to two things to make sure that our content complies with the censorship on those platforms. Number one are the YouTube community values. because a lot of our content inevitably ends up on YouTube. So we definitely work very close with that and make sure that those community policies are adhered to. And the other is the censorship that is on TV. Again, because we work very closely with TV and a lot of our content does end up there. So whenever we're producing or releasing anything online, we also make sure that whatever we produce would be allowed on TV later on as well. So we still are actually regulating ourselves under what is commonly accepted, but there are regulations coming, and they're being formed, and they will be coming soon.
Right. So just to summarize, I think so self-regulation is the key, and that's where it's going to go on going ahead from here on. And many of the trends are very similar for India and emerging nations, whether you call it freemium based, over dependence on telcos, increase in content costs. The trends are very much similar for India and other emerging nations in Asia as well. And that's how it's going to look like. So I think we just end this panel at that note. Just take the floor for question answer session. I think there's one question which we have from one of the participants. The question goes that, what's the best market for Indian content outside of India in terms of user base and revenue? Any of you who'd want to take this up? I think, Harish, this question is more relevant to you because Z is someone who's actually making this kind of content. Please, go ahead, please.
We operate in 190 countries. So, and it's a very open-ended question. And my answer will actually, to this question does change by the month. It changes by the quarter. It changes by the week. And sometimes it changes by the day. Because what is making sense to us today may not really be making sense next month. So, I mean, we have to go by the deal, and there is the gap. And I do see quite a lot of markets where Indian content is getting a very good acceptance and appeal. In terms of one is the value, in terms of how many $1 million or how big is the size, depending on how good is the price, depending on how much is the quantity. So this answer actually varies. I would actually say that, look, this depending on what kind of hat am I wearing, I may actually, the answer may vary from naming South Africa to Indonesia to, a Latin American country to a country in Arabic market. This has a varied answer. Thank you.
Right. Very interesting indeed. Thank you so much to all the panelists for taking a time out and giving us the great insights.